You're listening to Conservation Connection.
Presented by Last Chance Endeavors.
I'm Chance.
I'm Sarah Catherine.
We're a husband and wife team running a wildlife education nonprofit focused on connecting students to their environment.
Each week, here on Conservation Connection, we do just that by introducing you to the groundbreaking science and conservation work that's happening every day across the globe.
We talk to professionals working to protect our planet and ask them about their career,
their current projects,
their wild and crazy stories from the field,
and everything in between.
This episode is a collaboration with the Sun Valley Forum in Sun Valley, Idaho, and was made possible through a generous donation by the Nancy P. and Richard K. Robbins Family Foundation.
The Sun Valley Forum is an intergenerational meeting of forward-thinking professionals that come from a diverse range of disciplines.
These experts are on the cutting edge of what's happening in the fight for our future, and they've all come together at the Sun Valley Forum to share ideas and collaborate on solutions for a greener tomorrow.
Let's get to the show.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to another episode of Conservation Connection. We're here at the Sun Valley Forum in Sun Valley, Idaho, and we are very excited to be sitting down with Iveta Silova. She's a professor and associate dean of global engagement at Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at Arizona State University.
Welcome to the show.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about what did you come to the Sun Valley Forum to speak about?
I'm thrilled to be here in the Sun Valley Forum with such a diverse group of people, and I came here as one of the few people working directly in the sphere of education, working with thinking and working about how our schools and education systems both nationally and also globally have to change to address the environmental crisis that we are facing. It's the environmental crisis that we are facing is a problem that has to be solved across multiple disciplines, and education is at the core of the problem.
I think probably a lot of people don't typically think of, oh, there's a climate crisis and like that's directly impacting education. So what made you identify that and seek that out as something you wanted to change and have an impact on?
Yes, that's a great question. And maybe I'll start from even a couple of decades ago when the UN came up with the Millennial Development Goals and later, the goals that have not been met and then later replaced with the Sustainable Development Goals. In both of these sets of goals, education has been playing a really central part as a solution to the climate crisis, right? And kind of the idea behind all of these efforts was that if only we have more access to education and more access to quality education, then people will be educated enough, and that will automatically translate into the environmental behaviors, right, that will help us face and solve the climate crisis, right? And what we have seen throughout these decades is that the world is becoming more and more literate. In fact, the world is the most literate it has ever been in terms of literacy and numeracy rates, yet we are also closest to the environmental breakdown. So to me, the question is, what is it? Obviously, that literacy and numeracy alone is not enough, right? And so my question in my research and in my practice is, what is it about education that actually must change in very radical ways to help us both face but also address the climate crisis, right? Because whatever we are doing in education right now seems like it's only deepening the crisis, right? So if we look, for example, in these international student achievement scores like TIMSS or PISA, where countries are ranked on, for example, how students achieve in math or reading. So the countries with the highest achievement scores usually also have the highest environmental impact footprint. And so there are these really interesting connections that more of the same type of education that we offer right now is not working as a solution, but it's actually could be a problem itself. And in fact, environmental educators like David Orr has been talking about it for decades, right? But we nevertheless in the policy making levels, right, both nationally and internationally, continue to insist that we just need to increase access to education and maybe improve quality of education, but are not really thinking about fundamental reimagination of what education is, what we are educating for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there was this conversation that like the reason that we're having these problems is that there's not enough information out there, right? People don't have access to the information, and we have more access to information today than we have ever had in the history of humanity. And that hasn't turned out to be a great thing, right? Because the ways in which we interface with that information, which is basically education, right? It's basically how you are learning about the world around you and how you are being taught about the world around you, is not supporting people being able to take the information available and make environmental choices based on that information, right?
Absolutely. And I will add to it too, what we are learning in schools right now, I would say we need definitely literacy and we need more numeracy, right?
That's baseline.
And we need more science and we need climate education in schools. But we also need to make sure that schools are not teaching that humans are better than non-humans, right? We need to make sure that we are not teaching at schools that children are, or humans are separate from nature, right? So, because right now, what we are, very directly teaching our students in schools is that we teach them the values of human exceptionalism, independence, individualism, competitiveness, right? And all of this basically justifies human exploitation of nature. And at the same time, we are also planting these seeds, right, in children's mind that economic growth is good, that it's infinite, that natural resources are infinite too. And so it's actually really scary how we are positioning today's children in the world, right?
It comes back to the thought that like language matters, the way in which we discuss an idea. Literally, the words that you choose to discuss that concept affect the ways in which you think about it, and therefore the ways in which you consciously or unconsciously act or react to that issue.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Like you said, this issue has kind of been going on for a while, but when was it that you started this research project?
So, I think just in general, when SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals were set, were established, and when education became one of the Sustainable Development Goals, I think this is when my interest really peaked in this matter, because so that placed education very centrally in the sustainability efforts. But then again, if we look very carefully at the SDG 4, which is SDG dedicated to education, you can see that literacy and numeracy are on the very top of the metrics in which SDG 4 is measured. And there are a total of 7 metrics under SDG 4, right? And the last one, which is SDG 4.7, is the one that is dedicated to well-being, to values, to sustainable lifestyles, to mindsets. So basically everything that is really difficult to measure has been pushed down to the very bottom and basically not addressed in education policies, right? So policymakers globally and also nationally look at something that's very easily, that can be easily measured, and it's usually literacy and numeracy,
right,
and student achievement measured by tests. And that completely kind of pushes down and overlooks all of these other values, cultural values that are really critical, but are completely ignored right now. It's at least in the formal school systems. There are all kinds of amazing efforts that are going out outside of schools, or that are led by, individual teachers that are transforming individual students' lives and futures, right? But on a mass scale, mass schooling is failing to teach students how to be a part of the world and survive the climate crisis.
So I'm going to ask a very big question, and I'm going to try and pare it down a little bit so that you can give me any sense of a realistic answer. But here in the United States, if we have a teacher listening to this episode right now that agrees with you, but doesn't know what steps to take to start to make this radical change in how the human nature relationship is discussed in the school environment, what are things that teacher can do to help alleviate this issue?
It's a very basic one, and it's not maybe very easily implementable, but a very easy principle, I think, is that we have to stop learning about nature and we have to start learning with nature, right? And or you can say also the same, not learning about the world as if it's somewhere out there, right? That we can manipulate and observe from the distance, but learn with the world because we are part of the world, right? And we are part of nature. And I think that philosophical shift in thinking also, would lead to major pedagogical shifts, right? Curriculum shifts that just would, I think, very naturally flow out of this philosophical shift.
You are speaking our language, because we run the podcast, obviously, as part of our nonprofit, but a lot of what we do with the nonprofit is creating curriculum and training teachers to basically take students outside, which is this very simple step in saying that, like, you are not separated from the environment, you live within the environment, right? So one of my favorite things that we've ever done is we worked with a school in Clayton County, Georgia, where we just did herpetological surveys. I love catching lizards and snakes and all that sort of stuff. I did it in college. It's what I would be doing every day if I could. But we just went and we walked. There's a green space outside, and then they had a athletic field that had some tarps and stuff that had been laying out for a season. And so just lifting those tarps and being able to catch a ringneck snake or Fowler's toads or, all of these really awesome creatures that the high school students were absolutely not familiar with. And most of them live within walking distance of that school. Like, it was this great awakening for them that this is not, I'm not studying about something that exists on the other side of the planet. I'm studying something that I literally walk past twice a day to get to and from school. And I completely agree with you. And I know that if you're a teacher listening, that's very daunting. The idea of going out and catching snakes with your class is probably like nightmare level implementation for you, but there are ways to do it. And if you're interested in that, reach out to us at our nonprofit. We're in Georgia, but we'd be willing to help you wherever you are.
That's amazing. But can I do a quick plug-in for a couple of papers
please.
that could be interested in projects? So one is a paper which we wrote for UNESCO's Futures of Education Initiative, and it's called Learning to Become with the World. And it was really interesting that UNESCO actually accepted and published this paper, but this paper is written from the perspective of 2050. And kind of futuristically oriented, but we try to imagine basically what do we need to do in our educational systems now in order to be able to survive by 2050, right? Kind of like what are some of these major shifts that need to happen in education at the policy level, philosophical level, pedagogical level, curriculum level. So this paper kind of outlines some of the ideas that are very doable. And we tried in this paper to write as if these things already happened. And that kind of brings the urgency about what can be done now to imagine that it's possible, right? So that's one paper. And I'll send you the link for that. So it
Perfect.
could be maybe easily accessible. But another one is we have launched this really amazing project with students globally where we crowdsourced children and youth visions of education futures.
Cool.
In the context of climate crisis. And I think, and we asked questions about, for example, like what can you learn from nature that you cannot learn at school, right? Or what do you need to learn in order to survive, right? The climate crisis, questions that usually are not asked. And so we received answers. Students wrote from like more than 40 countries, from all parts of the world, right? And one of the several common threads basically were that they feel that they are part of nature and part of the world. They want to learn that at school. They feel that they need to learn interdependence, but in fact, they like all of these values and skills that they think are really critical for their learning, they are not getting it in schools, right? So if you look at that project, and that you can find it on our website, which is called turnitaroundcards.org. You can find all kinds of like really stunning art, images, and very short essays from students around the world that are trying to help policymakers imagine education system differently, right? And it's all along the lines of coexistence and being a part of nature. being also learning from ancestors and not only from textbooks, learning from and with nature, and not only in classrooms and, behind the walls of school buildings.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool. And if you're listening, which you are, if you're hearing this, we actually did another episode that talks some more about the Turn It Around cards. And this episode and that episode will probably be released fairly hand in hand. So you can check that out as well. I truly hope that we get to do another follow-up interview with you in a year or two, maybe here at Sun Valley, or maybe we'll come to Arizona and see you and everyone else we've interviewed from Arizona.
Which is apparently a powerhouse in sustainability, which is super
yes.
cool.
Yeah. It's quite an exciting place right now.
But thank you so much for being on the show today. And we will link all of those links that you said in our show notes. If you scroll down, you can check those out. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for all the amazing work that you're doing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conservation Connection.
If you enjoyed our podcast, go ahead and subscribe to make sure you catch every episode that we post.
We'd love to hear from you. So if you want to reach out, go to our website, lastchanceendeavors.com/contact, and shoot us an email.
We love questions from our listeners, so if you heard something that you want to know more about, be sure to let us know.
If you've got a minute to spare, leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts will help other conservation-minded people find the show. We'd really appreciate it.
A big thanks to the people working to protect our planet, and a big thanks to you for listening. Don't forget to tune in next week.